today is a significant date because today the Board of Canvassers has officially certified the petitions to get on the ballot. So basically, it will be on the ballot. I guess there's no question about it. And that was quite an accomplishment for this coalition because they've tried, what, 3 times before? Yeah. Twice, you know, 3 times before. So very good. So Jamie did a good job, and I mentioned Jamie because he helped me put this program together. And I'd like to introduce our debaters. We've got Scott Greenlee, who is the president of Healthy and Productive Michigan. Now, Healthy and Productive Michigan is, I guess, kind of also attached to Sensible Approach to Marijuana, the SAM group, correct? Is that?
Smart Approach to Marijuana
Smart.
is a national donor of ours, I guess.
Very good. So there is a national group that is behind it. He's also president of Greenlee Consulting, and he's a political and corporate consultant. He, at one time, was the international president of the JCs back in 2007. So, and that's a worldwide organization, does a lot of great charitable work. And he was also the former vice president of the Michigan GOP. And he's was also worked with Bill Schuette in the Attorney General's office. And then debating on we'll call it the pro side of the marijuana referendum, we've got Barton Morris, who is an attorney with the Vincente Setterberg law firm. He serves as council member of the marijuana law section of the Michigan Bar Association. I didn't even know there was that section of the Michigan Bar Association. Yeah. And chair of its science committee. He is the only attorney in Michigan certified by the American Chemical Society as a forensic lawyer scientist maintaining a focus on marijuana-related science. Barton was recognized by Super Lawyer magazine. I think they're in the new Avengers movie, is that right? Super Lawyer. As an outstanding attorney in 2014, 15, and 16. And D-Business magazine has also named Barton Morris as a top attorney in the Metro Detroit in 2012 and 2013. So what we're going to do tonight, thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
We're very lucky to have this kind of top people in this, to be here on this, I guess we'll call it historic day in Michigan's history. Now what we're going to do in this debate, we're going to start off each of them with 5-minute, and they don't have to use the whole 5 minutes, and that's going to be to state their case, and then we're going to give them 3 minutes to sort of refute the other one or respond to the other one. Then we're going to come out with the cordless mic, and everybody that wants to ask a question out in the audience will get 30 seconds to ask a question, and then each of these gentlemen will get 2 minutes to respond to the question. So Terry, and you'll do the timing for us, and Terry will wave, and then I'll try to catch your wave, and then so if you guys can just keep an eye on Terry over there, he's going to be. So I guess we'll start off with the affirmative, which would be on the pro side. So Barton, would you like to start off?
Yes, I would.
Very good, thank you.
My microphone good?
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much for having me. My name is Barton Morris. I am a lawyer with the Cannabis Legal Group. Vincente Setterberg is a partner law firm in Colorado. But I do marijuana law, and I'm representing the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol this evening. Today is a historic day. It's something that we've been looking forward to for a long time, which is the fact that the Board of Canvassers certified our petition to include this initiative on the ballot, and that initiative is to legalize recreational marijuana. Specifically, this initiative will allow for adults to be in possession of and to purchase up to 2.5 ounces of marijuana. It would also allow for a commercialized, regulated system to distribute that marijuana, grow and distribute that marijuana. It would also allow for a lot of other things too, though. individuals would be allowed to grow 12 plants on their own and be able to give somebody else some marijuana as well without remuneration, without being paid for it. It'll also allow somebody to be in possession of up to 10 ounces of marijuana in their home. And most importantly, and very importantly, it's going to be regulated. And it's going to be regulated in a fashion that is very similar to the Medical Marijuana Act and the Facilities Licensing Act that was legalized recently or passed recently to provide for the commercialization of marijuana. It was something that the state of Michigan hasn't seen yet, and a lot of other states have. What I find to be really interesting is the fact that we have entitled this initiative the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol. But the fact is that marijuana is not going to be regulated like alcohol. Alcohol is as common as everybody knows it. They sell it here at this golf course while people are playing golf, and they sell it in liquor stores and bars, and there's public consumption allowed at sporting events. Marijuana is not going to be regulated like that. That's not what we're asking for now. But the question really is, we entitled that, why? Why isn't marijuana regulated like alcohol, or why is that such a crazy concept? Because I think that it should be pretty clear, marijuana is much safer than alcohol. It's a much better alternative to alcohol. For instance, alcohol kills annually 88,000 people every single year from alcohol abuse. 88,000 people. Marijuana kills none, like zero, right? Marijuana is also has medicinal benefit, as many people know, and as the state has recognized by passing the Medical Marijuana Act. There are people that are being treated for cancers, glaucoma, seizure disorders, and then of course chronic pain. Of course, alcohol is nothing but a toxic substance that fills treatment centers and causes significant traffic fatalities. On the other hand, marijuana treats chronic pain. And when I speak about chronic pain, this is a very important subject because, as we all should know in this room, that there is an opiate epidemic in this country and right now, in our society right now. 20,000 people a year are being killed from overdoses, from heroin, from illicit drugs. Over 10,000 people are being killed from just prescription drugs. Things are prescribed, Schedule II controlled substances that are attempting to treat pain, but what they're doing is they're making our society addicted to these things. Marijuana not only is an alternative to that. Marijuana and cannabis can be utilized in order to treat chronic pain, but as it is also something that has been proven to reduce mortality rates in states that have regulated recreational marijuana.
1 minute.
Because people are no longer utilizing these drugs as much, right? People are not going to be hospitalized anymore. Their hospital rates are down. The mortality rate is down, or the deaths are down, and also the overdose rates are down. So marijuana is it's saving lives. One of the most important things about cannabis and what we're seeking to do is eliminate these senseless arrests by nonviolent marijuana offenders. There are people that are, and most specifically, African Americans, minorities, are literally 3.3 times more likely to be arrested for nonviolent possession of marijuana. They're not hurting anybody, yet they're more likely to be arrested. There are 20,000 arrests every single year for nonviolent marijuana offenses. And these are offenses that are putting criminal records on people's lives. They're putting people in jail. That has to stop. I believe that even Mr. Greenlee will agree. That has to stop, and that is what we're going to do with the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol. And it will be regulated. And because of that regulation, it's also going to decrease the black market. I'll save my rest for later.
Thank you, Barton. Very good. Okay, Scott, 5 minutes.
Excellent, thank you. Well, first of all, thanks, Mr. Chairman, for hosting the event, and thank you all for taking the time to be here. This is a very interesting topic, and one that I'm very familiar with historically as someone who worked on the board of directors at Project Rehab in Grand Rapids for 6 years, and as someone who has made it through life somehow, despite all these wonderful things that cannabis does, without ever having used any cannabis or, believe it or not, ever having a puff of a cigarette. And that's because when I was 3 or 4 years old and could start to understand what my parents were saying, they said, Scott, you've got asthma, and your lungs are not good, so anything you inhale is not going to help your lungs. So I haven't inhaled. That's actually a fact. I'm one of the few. But I started to pay attention to this stuff, in 8th, 9th, 10th grade, because friends of mine started smoking cigarettes. And we all know how damaging big tobacco's been in America. It's well documented. It's caused a ton of health problems. So I started paying attention and thinking, wow, maybe, I see the cool kids are doing it. Maybe I should try. But I said, no, my lungs aren't good. I don't need to damage those. And then a funny thing happened. About 11th or 12th grade, the cigarettes looked a little different. And I thought, well, what the heck is that? And it turned out that not every one of my classmates that was doing cigarettes jumped to marijuana, but some did. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I wonder what that does for you. So then I got into a couple years at Grand Rapids Junior College, and I said, wow, what do you guys got at that party? What is that? And they're like, oh, we're doing cigarettes, we're doing marijuana, but it's not quite giving us enough, So we thought we might want to try something a little stronger, and obviously it escalates from there for some people. So I became kind of opposed to it at that point. I thought to myself, this is not something that's necessarily good for people's health, good for people's society, and the last thing we need is another big tobacco in this country. So as we take a look at the issue, as my colleague up here knows, this has no effect on medical marijuana. So all those things about how it's helping people with cancer and helping people with chronic pain, all that continues whether this ballot proposal passes or fails. And that's something that's very, very important and something that we're going to have to get out there as opposing this ballot measure, because one of the first things that our opposition started doing, very wisely might I add, is screaming, oh my goodness, you can't take away people's medicine. Oh my goodness, look at all the good that's being done. This has nothing, folks, nothing to do with medical marijuana. This is only recreational that's going to be on the ballot this year. And we weren't at all surprised that they got the signatures to qualify and to put this on the ballot. I don't think it was quite as much a grassroots effort as they might like to portray. They spent nearly $1 million buying signatures, hiring people, sending people out. I don't know what they were paying per signature, but I took a look at their campaign finance report today, and they've raised nearly $1 million, and they have $17,000 cash on hand. Now, don't let that concern you, those of you that are pro. One of their spokespeople, John Truscott, noted yesterday that they plan to spend $6 million on the effort. So the money's going to continue to flow in for them. But they've spent nearly $1 million getting those signatures. That's a little bit high, but I know that they, no pun intended, by the way, but they had tried a couple times before and didn't make it. So I understand the investment, and I understand the big money that will come from this if recreational marijuana is allowed in Michigan. Now, one thing that I brought up at the Board of Canvassers meeting this morning, and we didn't challenge the signatures. Again, they invested very heavily to make sure they got those signatures. We talked more about the rule of law and the fact that in any type of society, laws kind of flow from the top down. So you've got federal law, then you've got state law, then you've got local municipal law. And for example, if the Oakland County Board of Commissioners, and we have one of those folks here today, if they got together and they said next week that in Oakland County, you can now go 100 miles an hour, no problem, just don't go over 100. And they changed all their speed limit signs and stuff. I'm guessing that the state police would still pull you over if you were going 71 miles an hour in a 70 or what have you. And that's because any law that Oakland County passes or any municipality here has to conform with state law. It's just kind of how an organized society works. Now, that means that state laws, and the last time I checked, we do live in the United States. Michigan's still part of that.
One minute,
This
Scott.
is not a 10th Amendment issue at this point, and I think our Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, made that very clear on January 3rd of this year when he rolled back the Cole memo, which essentially said, we don't care about the rule of law, we're going to enforce what we want. And that's obviously no way to operate. So that was rolled back, and it is our responsibility as citizens to conform to the rule of law. And there's no question about it, marijuana is absolutely part of the Controlled Substance Act, which remains in effect. So we're kind of opposed to it on that level because we don't think that people should start picking and choosing what laws they like and what laws they don't like. There's a process to change it, but it has to come federally because this is a federal initiative, not a states' rights issue at this point. If that changed, obviously that would go away. That's before we get into any of the medical challenges, any of the tax challenges, any of the enforcement challenges, and any of the legal challenges, all of which I will hope to highlight as we continue through this evening and my rebuttal time, and certainly any questions that you guys might have. Again, thanks very much for hosting.
Thank you for that. Very good. Scott Greenlee. We'll give you each 3 minutes for rebuttal time. So,
Thank you. And with all due respect to Scott, I have to say that federal law does not interfere with the state's right to enact a law that doesn't contradict it. And as an attorney, I can assure you that there is plenty of support for this. The 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution states that the states shall have our own rights as long as they don't conflict with the with federal law. The Controlled Substances Act, which Mr. Greenlee is talking about, specifically in Section 903, clearly states that the Controlled Substances Law that schedules marijuana as a Schedule I controlled substance does not operate unless there is a positive conflict between the provision of the authority of the state. It to the exclusion of any state law on the same subject matter. I just read that out of the federal laws, 21 U.S.C. Section 903. So and by the way, Jeff Sessions may have said something, but Donald Trump just on April 20th, last Friday, backed up a state's right to legislate and to legalize marijuana. He said it in response to Cory Gardner's opposition to Jeff Sessions' revocation of the Cole Memorandum. So what happened just yesterday, Cory Gardner said that he is introducing legislation next week in order to clarify this issue because it needs to be clarified. That legislation, which is bipartisan, by the way, and Cory Gardner is a Republican. It's bipartisan legislation that is going to be introduced and is going to I believe, get very, very good attention to ensure that a state has a right to legislate and to legalize marijuana. Donald Trump said it was that he supports it. Cory Gardner is introducing that bipartisan legislation. There's going to be significant support for it. And I also want to mention something about big tobacco. This isn't about big tobacco. In fact, this is not about big marijuana. The money that we raised in order to put this issue on the ballot was a grassroots campaign. Jamie Lowell and MI Legalized did not accept any money from large corporations, none. Like I have donated myself thousands and thousands of dollars out of my own pocket, and just like thousands of other people have done. This is not big tobacco. And the initiative is designed to ensure that there is the place for small individuals to be able to have a say in this because they've identified a licensee called a micro business and a micro garden. So it is literally going to ensure that smaller individuals have the ability to grow their own and sell it as long as they're licensed and as long as they're doing so under the law. And I think that is what we're trying to do to ensure this doesn't become big marijuana.
Time. Thank you, Barton. Scott?
Thank you.
3 minutes?
Sure. So I think we're going to agree to disagree on the legal interpretation of where the federal government is, although it's interesting that he pointed out right after saying that it was up to the states currently that there was a deal that Trump was talking about to make it a states' rights issue. So if it was already okay on a state-by-state basis, why is that Republican senator introducing this bipartisan legislation to make that happen? So I think there's a pretty obvious conflict there. I would also note, with all due respect to the president, just because a president says something doesn't mean that it already automatically happens, and we've seen that historically. A lot of politicians have said this is a great idea. A lot of politicians have said this is a terrible idea, as they have on numerous issues. Let's wait and see how this bipartisan bill goes and what attention it does get, if it gets some, because at this point it's clearly being worked on because it's not a states' rights issue. If it was a states' rights issue, if that was clear, this entire thing that he brought up wouldn't be brought up. Now, I wanted to jump back to some of the criminal stuff that he's talking about because I sat at lunch today with the prosecutor in Muskegon County, and we were talking about all these people that are in jail because all they did was smoke a little weed, and how our courts are overflowing with this, and it's costing so much money and such a challenge. In fact, he sent an email this afternoon. I've got it on my phone if folks want to look at it later on, from the elected prosecutor, a Democrat of Muskegon County. And currently, I'm serious here now, guys, there's 8 people in prisons in Michigan for only marijuana violations. There's about 39,000 in prison, by the way. Last year, I think the number was 57, although 23 of those were probation-type violations. If we walked out of here and we all lit up and the police drove by, chances are we'd get a warning. If we didn't get a warning, we'd get a ticket. They're not locking up people who smoke one joint or have one joint unless they have other issues. Now, if you're on probation, if you had a DUI, if you got in a fight at a bar, if you assaulted somebody, if you had some other crime, and then you were caught having it, of course that would be a different issue. But in terms of what's actually happening, this just doesn't happen. I was at an event in Taylor with Congresswoman Dingell recently. There were 2 judges in the room, and I took a chance. I said, gentlemen, would you stand up? And in fact, a couple people are here tonight that were there, so they can vouch for this. I said, gentlemen, stand up. I said, how long have you been a judge? He said, 18 years. I said, how long have you been a judge? He said, well, I'm new, 3 years. I then qualified how long they'd been attorneys. And they had about 55 to 60 years of legal experience between them. And I said, gentlemen, how many people have you sentenced to prison for a first or even a second offense of just marijuana? I'm not talking about the guy who's out on assault and battery and has 3 years of probation and got caught with marijuana. I'm not talking about the guy who's got 18 pounds of it in his trunk and he's selling it in his neighborhood to your kids. I'm talking about somebody who just lit up one joint one time. They're like, well, in our 21 years of combined judicial experience, never? And I said, okay, great. So you were attorneys before that. How many of those did you see in that situation? And again, the answer was never. So this just doesn't happen, folks.
Your time. Thank you, Scott.
Pleasure.
What we're going to do now is let you guys ask the questions, and we'll give you 30 seconds. So if anybody wants to ask a question, come on out. I'm not going to let go of the microphone. I've learned the hard way. Do not let go of the microphone.
You are qualified to run for office.
30 seconds.
Just a question I had for both of them. I've been in a psych hospital, and some of the patients there, the only thing that caused them to have, the doctor says, schizophrenia, and they're adults, they're not childs, and they're classified as having a psychosis after smoking marijuana. And I just wonder what you think about that.
Barton, you want to start with that?
Thank you. I am not familiar with any scientific documented studies that say that marijuana causes psychosis. That's the first time I've heard of it. I don't want to say that it's not true because I just had never heard that before, and so perhaps you know something more than I do, although I am a lawyer forensic scientist. Just kidding. That's not something I've ever seen before.
Well, you pulled the lawyer science card, and I can't match that. But I have read some things along those lines and other things in medical journals and what have you. I think that every type of drug and every type of substance, whether it's the stuff we're talking about today or really anything, can affect people differently. I'm allergic to cats. I don't think we should necessarily outlaw cats, but I don't want one in my house. Then again, I'm kind of annoyed by cats. I like dogs better. But I think that there have been things written up in journals, and obviously I think that's a bad thing. Anything that could cause any type of serious psychosis and schizophrenia and stuff should be taken very, very seriously and researched in great detail.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else? Oh, Andrea?
Mr. Moore,
We're too close to the speaker over here. Let's go.
Mr. Morris, can you clarify something you said? I don't know if I wrote down. You had said that pot saves lives because in states where it was legalized, people had stopped using opioids and switched to using legal pot.
Absolutely, that's true. So, and that's been proven is that marijuana use in states where it's been legalized has the opiate use has decreased, hospitalizations have decreased.
Yeah, but you said there's a causal relationship. Do you have a way? I mean, can we get that information afterwards, where you have the documentation for that?
Yes, yes, I can provide that probably during this meeting because I have it here. There is definitely a decrease in not mortality and opiate use, deaths, hospitalizations, and overdoses.
That's a correlation.
Yeah, that's not.
You're right. It's a correlation. We don't listen. Recreationalized marijuana has only been in Colorado since 2014. We don't have enough studies to be able to say that there's a correlation. But that is there's a correlation, not a causation. So
that's what she was asking for, the causation.
I'm not familiar with that. But I know 100% that there is a documented correlation that is consistent among all states. There's 9 states right now that have legalized marijuana, and that is a consistency, especially with the older ones. Most of the older ones being Washington and Colorado and Oregon.
So, is it my? Can I rebut?
No,
okay, thanks. So I've also seen statistics along these lines, but I've seen statistics tell me the exact opposite. And I think there are studies out there that will tell you both. And I think he hit on a very good point. It's been 5 years for Colorado, and everybody else has an even shorter time frame and an even shorter window. So I think that as states look to get into this, and things don't necessarily always turn out as projected or planned, we need to be very, 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 very cautious and do a lot more study about what's really happening. We can't get a good snapshot of this stuff in 5 years. I mean, we talk about the tax dollars, which I hope we'll get into here in a bit. You know, it's all projected, and none of it considers long-term health issues and long-term law enforcement issues and other things that are gonna be causal effects, unintended consequences of states that engage in this lawless activity. So I think that he's right that we have a short time frame, and I think we're both right that we can find statistics to say about anything that we want, depending on who we survey and what have you.
Thank you, Scott. Whoops, thank you, Scott. Thank you. Another question? Wait, we had. Okay, I'll get to you guys in a minute. I'll get to this young lady over here for 1 second here. I'll hold it. I'll hold it. I'll hold it. I'll hold it.
Oh, okay. Mr. Morris, I'd like to direct this question to you. When you were saying that this is not going to be big marijuana, would you say that in California and Colorado, is that big marijuana?
No, big marijuana as it relates to big tobacco, right? So big tobacco, there's large companies that control a significant amount of the marketplace for tobacco, right? R.J. Reynolds, right? So we're all familiar with these companies, and these companies, they're big, right? So for marijuana, first of all, the industry has to stay within the state, right? So there cannot be people that are operating in California that are also operating here in Michigan, because it is a state's right. It has to remain in this state. And so R.J. Reynolds and tobacco and alcohol, that is throughout the entire country, and it is not. That's how we distinguish it.
Scott?
So again, we're kind of operating on futuristic projections here, some of which may be accurate, and some of which, of course, won't be accurate. That's what happens when you do projections. If that weren't the case, my beloved Michigan Wolverines wouldn't have lost a game in the last 45 years. So we can say that there won't be big marijuana like there is big tobacco. But in reality, when you look at a lot of the people that have been behind big tobacco, guys like John Boehner, who recently just jumped into the marijuana game, little financial opportunity for him there. I think we can see a lot of similarities and a lot of patterns. And unfortunately, in states like Michigan that are larger, certainly states like Colorado, I suppose it would depend on your definition of big, but when we're talking billions and billions and billions of quote-unquote projected dollars, I kind of consider that big. I mean, I'm a humble guy from Lansing Township. I don't live in a big mansion, but that kind of money to me strikes me as pretty big, and certainly strikes me as something that could get out of control quickly, particularly when you see how they package some of the stuff in Colorado. Very similar to using the Joe Camel to attract kids. There's these gummies and all sorts of cute little candies and things like that that aren't exactly what you'd market to a 30, 40, 50-year-old type person. So I'm very concerned about it.
Very good, Scott. And I've booked plenty of times, so we'll get to all your questions. And it's important we use the microphone because the gentleman from Media Network, that's the only way you can pick up our voices. So,
if it were legalized, how would you differentiate between the controlled medical production and stuff versus non-controlled, or if somebody has a medical set of marijuana he's selling and he's got some more he just sells on the side, you know, how would you differentiate between those?
This is the importance of regulation, right? And this is a good problem to have. We don't have this problem with alcohol because there is no medical benefit to alcohol, and there's no alcohol medical act, right? There is medical marijuana. And so just like in Colorado, there's two different stores you can go to. There is one that sells only medical marijuana, and they have their rules and regulations, and they tax it less, and they ensure that it's tested properly, just like in recreational marijuana, where anybody can go in there. Not anybody, anybody that's authorized that is of the correct age, and they're able to purchase marijuana. But still, it's regulated, meaning that there are rules. They have to be followed. All the medicine has to be tested. This is one of the biggest things that I think is what's really, really super great about what we're about to do. All medicine that is sold, all medicine, whether it's medicine or recreational, has to be tested for safety. That's one thing that this state has never seen before. We're not even seeing that right now. There's been medical marijuana provisioning centers, dispensaries in this state for years, and none of that medicine has been mandatorily tested for microbiological contaminants or pesticides or residual solvents. There's going to be proper labeling. These are things that are hallmarks of a recreational and medical marijuana program, to the degree to which that it is something that is going to provide true regulation to ensure that those that have a medical illness that need it for and has been certified for medical illness will get exactly what they're looking for.
So the medical versus recreational thing is a very good question. And honestly, like a lot of this that we're trying to look into a crystal ball and project, we just don't know. What I can tell you is, and this will probably be a stunner to a lot of people in this room, but having worked at the Attorney General's office for 3 years, and right when medical was getting big in Michigan, there was a large level of abuse going on with medical. And I'm not saying that hasn't been cleaned up by a lot of the changes that have happened, but you know, it was a situation where, oh, I got a little backache, I can't really sleep, how much can I pay to get a card? And then they've got, you know, marijuana. So I think that in a lot of situations, the medical folks, the folks who currently have cards, aren't going to need to renew them and aren't going to need to go and get that medical stuff anymore, because they're just using it recreationally, quite frankly, now. And they're gonna be able to go to any corner, you know, and get this stuff, which is a bad deal. We know there's corruption in the medical currently. We don't know how much. We are pleased that they've tightened those rules quite a bit. The Senate and the House deserve some kudos for doing that. But I think that a lot of that's going to go away, and it's going to be a little more freer and a little more, you know, wild west. I mean, obviously, if it's available at multiple retailers and you don't have to have any card or any background to even check it at all, there's going to be a lot more of it around, and a lot of it around for everybody. So I don't like that idea.
I'm gonna go. Oh, you wanted a follow-up?
Yeah, just sort of a follow-up.
Quick follow-up. Hold on.
I think I heard just the other week that there was sort of a big crackdown on medical marijuana dispensaries and stuff. Can you talk about that? What was happening with that?
Oh, what I think you may be referring to is the fact that the regulators, Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs, sent out cease and desist letters to those dispensaries or retail operations that were in operation and not having filed the requisite licensing paperwork with the state. And so a lot of I mean, this is the transition period. This is what's necessary in order to go from an unregulated system to a regulated system, where a lot of people have to close. But then again, there's a lot of people that were able to stay open through temporary authorization, or their authorization to stay open temporarily. And I think that's what you may be referring to.
We don't need bad actors in any form of society. You might remember a few years ago there were probably 100 charitable poker rooms, in Oakland County, and you could trip over them and what have you. There's a lot of corruption, a lot of bad actors, so they came down on those folks and did a lot of undercover work and closed a lot of them and made sure only the good actors survived. I think this was very similar. As noted, there was a lot of corruption. There was a lot of bad actors in the medical field, and I applaud the state for taking that a lot more seriously and closing a lot of that down. I can only imagine how many of those might reemerge if this ballot proposal passes. Be a real problem.
Next.
Thank you. One of the things that when I'm talking to my friends and family and neighbors about whether or not adult use is appropriate, their concern is, what about the kids? Are the kids going to just be able to go in and buy marijuana? Mr. Greenlee's, said a couple of times, these people will be selling your kids marijuana. Can you address, are there provisions in the law that prevent children from consuming marijuana? Or purchasing, I should say, purchasing.
Shall I?
Feel free.
Okay. Of course. First of all, when I say the law, the current law, the Medical Marijuana Act, does prohibit any children from getting marijuana unless their parents agree to it, right? So in order to get certified, children have to get their parents' approval to ensure that. So that's one way, right? But the recreational marijuana, our coalition language, prohibits any sale to anybody that's under the age of 21. And let me tell you something. This is the manner in which these rules are going to be enforced is going to be very, very strict. That is one thing that is a hallmark also of the commercial nature of marijuana sales and retail and the entire industry. When those retail establishments, if they were ever able to get caught selling to an underage individual, they get their license taken away. They get severely fined and penalized. It is something that I know a lot of my clients don't even want to even think about. We know that the retail establishments in Colorado, they are highly sensitive to compliance. Regulatory compliance is the #1 thing that is most important to those that are licensed in the marijuana industry, and so that directly goes to that issue, is the sale to underage kids. Regulatory compliance is #1 in our industry, and that's not going to happen.
So there are regulations in the writing, and they're frankly good regulations, most of them, but you got to use a little common sense here too, and you got to say, can a 19-year-old walk into the bar in the other room and wind up with a beer? Probably has happened. Certainly they don't want it to happen. Certainly I assume this establishment, like all establishments, are employing good and responsible people who are checking IDs, who are looking for fake IDs, etc. But we all know that it happens regularly. If more of the stuff is around, it's more accessible for everybody, and that includes people that are underage. And then you think about the scary stuff that we read in the Detroit Free Press right around the time the Cole memo was being rolled back by Attorney General Sessions, where a child in another state who was 5 years old happened to be at his neighbor's house and grabbed the wrong brownie that person's parents, who were of course over 21, had, and the subsequent rush to the hospital and what have you. So more of this stuff being around is a bad idea for children, and it's a real concern. And also, when you guys get home, Google search marijuana, candy, products, Colorado, and just take a look at the photos that come up, and you tell me who they're trying to market to.
While we were here, we had
another candidate walk in. A gubernatorial candidate, Evan Space, has entered the room. Where are you? Oh, very good. Stand up. See what we got. Evan Space.
Yes, I'm Eric Reynolds. I'm a Thetford Township trustee of my community. My biggest concern is that which the public perception of law enforcement. When I see the charts and the statistics of over 60% of the population supporting the favorization of legalization of marijuana, it concerns me that we haven't brought the subject to the peak of saying, okay, if for example, in my community, we're very pro cannabis community. But it upsets me that the majority of my community has issues with law enforcement and do not trust law enforcement simply because this is still illegal. And I, as a candidate for office, also wish to see the community come together. By doing that, we can see we can restore proper trust in law enforcement, rebuild our community by the social connections that we have. Law enforcement will have a better time solving other more serious crimes if we have a more regulatory system or a legal, if we make marijuana legal, for example. I think it's a big issue. I think it's a serious one. So many other issues complicate law enforcement. Yeah, thank you.
Was that a question? Or? Oh, comment.
I just see it.
Good. That's all right. We'll just take that as a rhetorical question.
Okay.
Very good. All right, next.
I can answer. It's okay.
Oh, did you want to respond to that?
Sure, I'll respond.
Okay, go ahead.
So again, the numbers of people that are actually being arrested and put in jail for just marijuana use is very, very, very low. Like only, 7 or 6 are currently in prison for just that. When you start to add in parole violations, like I've talked about earlier, the number increases, of course. When you start to add in intent to distribute, the number increases. But just marijuana is not such an issue. And the percentages you brought up with the polls is interesting and something I wanted to get to. Yeah, apparently 60% of Michigan is in favor of this thing, so it's going to pass. It passes everywhere. It's not a big deal. Well, the truth of the matter is 5 states have voted it down, including our neighbor to the south, Ohio. Arizona recently, their voters went to the polls and said no. And I don't know how you guys feel about polls after the last presidential race, but in this day and age, and depending on how you phrase the questions, they can tell you one story, they can tell you another. And in fact, I know there's some people in here who were involved in politics in 2010, and we had a gubernatorial election that year, and there were 2 fine gentlemen running for the Democratic nomination, and there were 5 running in the Republican side, for that primary in 2010. And as many as 6 or 7 months before, 7 months, I believe, you had a attorney general who was sitting, you had a state senator, you had a congressman, and you had a sheriff of this county running, and then you had this business guy who nobody really knew. In fact, he was at 0% in the polls early in January, and lo and behold, by the time the first week of August rolled around, he won the race easily, and then won in November easily. His name, of course, is Rick Snyder. So I don't put too much into these polls at this point. I mean, again, if we did, we'd probably have a different president right now.
Let me comment on marijuana arrests in jail. I am a criminal defense attorney, and I have been for the past 20 years. I am firsthand can tell you that there are individuals that get arrested for marijuana that end up going to jail. They don't end up going to jail immediately. What generally happens is that they are now placed in the system, they're placed on probation, and if they don't abide by probation, that's the penalty, is going to jail. And so our children are going to jail. Right? We have adults that are going to jail for nothing more than being in possession of marijuana. I see it every day, and I'm not even kidding when I say this. I have clients that come in and they're pulled over. They don't have a medical marijuana card. They are found in a small amount with a small amount of marijuana. They're not given a warning. These police officers don't give warnings anymore. Everything is on tape. Everything is being recorded. They do not have the discretion that they used to have. They are arresting individuals, and they are taking individuals against their will, taking their liberty, putting them in the back of a police car, embarrassing them, making them late to work, making them miss whatever appointments they had to do, putting them in jail, making them come to court. When they go to court, they have to miss work again. They have to spend money on a lawyer. They have to have a judge yell at them and tell them that they're a bad person. They have the potential to put a conviction on their record that could literally mean that they don't get a job. And then if they violate probation, they go to jail. All of them. This is not an exaggeration. This is what is going on in our state day after day after day. So when there may be only 6 in prison, yeah, that's prison. The prison is a year or more, right? You can go to jail for a second offense of marijuana. That is a 2-year offense. You can go up to jail for up to 2 years. First offense of marijuana, first offense in our state right now is a maximum 1 year in jail. That means a judge has the ability to give somebody up to 1 year. Perhaps they don't always give them 1 year, but certainly they can get a month, 3 months, 6 months. You think it doesn't happen? It happens all the time. Not only in this state, but in this county particularly.
Thank you, Barton.
Note the number of times he said probation, by the way. Note the number of times he said, then if they do it again when they're on probation, then
Or
they
anything.
get.
You can violate
Okay?
in any way
So
and go to jail. You can
the thing
violate.
is probation, not just a one-timer.
Anybody goes to jail for possession of marijuana, it's wrong.
Okay, Commissioner Kowal has a question.
Thank you. I have huge concerns about traffic fatalities and people driving under the influence. We now have what are called DREs. They're specially trained officers for drug recognition enforcement. When somebody's pulled over because they're not driving right and they're acting goofy, but they're blowing 0, so they have to have these officers come out and they're trained to recognize when somebody's under the influence of a substance. I'm just worried that we're introducing we'll have more carnage on the roads because of more people behind the wheels. We've already got distracted driving, we've got everything else. That's just something else to throw in the mix. To me, that's a real worry.
Thank you.
This is a real worry, meaning that traffic safety is always a real concern, and that is something that is very, 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 I also know a lot about, right? I know that this state, the country kills about 12 to 15,000 people a year in traffic fatalities as it relates to alcohol, not marijuana, right? I can also tell you this, I can guarantee you right now this individual is going to say, yes, their traffic fatalities are up because of marijuana. And guess what else? There are plenty of studies that say otherwise. In fact, and I have a study right here with me right now from the Washington Post that says, we just don't know. It's too early to make a determination as to whether there are going to be significantly more or significantly less traffic fatalities because of marijuana. But our initiative specifically states that we are not promoting the use of marijuana in driving. Nobody is. Nobody from our side will ever say that it's okay to drive under the influence of marijuana. It's not. It's not okay to drive under the influence of anything. I have 2 children, and 2 young children, and I'd hate to see what would happen. It's difficult to see people die senselessly or get injured senselessly because somebody is under the influence of anything. But simply because marijuana is legal doesn't mean that people will be irresponsible. In fact, that is the whole point. We are regulating to ensure responsible use. That is the point, and responsible use means not driving under the influence.
So my friend's getting to know me too well. He knew exactly what I was going to say, which is, yeah, there are numbers on both sides of this, and certainly I can demonstrate, some areas that have increased in traffic accidents and traffic fatalities and what have you after recreational marijuana has increased. Which, by the way, if you guys like paying a lot of high auto insurance in Michigan, take a look at auto insurance rates in states that have legalized recreational marijuana. Good luck. Michigan's #1, and we'll be #1 by a larger margin if this happens. But back to the driving. It's in your system for a lot longer period of time than alcohol, which causes law enforcement huge challenges with how they're going to police this. I mean, It's not as simple as taking a breathalyzer. You can do marijuana and 7 days later it's still in your system. Is it still affecting you? I don't know. It probably depends on the individual and their medical makeup and what else they have done to themselves, but it would still show up in a test. So, you know, if there's more of it around, more people are going to use. If more people are using, more people are going to think, oh, I can make this drive or I can what have you, and it only stands to common sense that there's going to be more problems along these lines. And the auto insurance rates in the states that have approved it can tell you a good story as well. And I know with your time in the legislature, you understand how that works.
Very good. Jim Teenel is here asking a question, the former chairman of the Oakland County Republican Party.
Well, first a question. A lot of figures were quoted in the beginning of the debate in the opening statements. How many deaths here, how many deaths there. But it wasn't specified whether that was for the state of Michigan or for the country. So when you quote traffic deaths, if you could be more specific on that, that would be helpful. The next question is a more realistic question. Would you both comment on whether or not you're for or against the ballot proposal or the legislature approving it, and explain in detail why?
We are for voters to decide, the voters of the state of Michigan, right? So that's what we're for. Now, if the legislature wishes to introduce it, we're for that too. I mean, that's what our legislature does. They are elected officials that are elected to perform the will of their constituents. And the will of their constituents overwhelmingly is to support marijuana laws and to legalize recreational marijuana. But we don't have a lot of comfort that they're going to do that, and nor do we have to. That is why we have the ability to do a referendum. That's why we have the ability to collect signatures and let our voters to decide. And that is what we are intending on doing, is letting the voters of Michigan decide whether legalized marijuana should be the law of this state.
We oppose both. We don't think the legislature should approve it. We think that it would be wrong for a variety of reasons, including the rule of law and including taking the decision away from the people. And we think the people also should not approve it. In fact, our position is because it is in conflict with federal law, it shouldn't even be on the ballot.
Quick follow-up, Jim?
Yeah. So if the legislature approved it, wouldn't regulating it be much easier in the future?
If the legislature approved it, would it be easier to regulate? Well, the persons that are...
To have a 3/4 majority in order to make any changes. You only have a simple majority if the legislature approves it. If it goes on the ballot, then it's going to take a 3/4 majority if it passes.
Okay.
Comment on that.
Yes, I mean, so what I think, just to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about, a ballot initiative that is passed, just like the Medical Marijuana Act, requires a supermajority, a 3/4 majority in order to amend it, and it has been amended. The Medical Marijuana Act has been amended to reflect a couple different amendments. So would we prefer?
That was just regulations that were not included in passing the bill, and it was done with a simple majority.
No, that's not true. It was necessary. It was the legislature. It was necessary to vote on it in order to include edible forms of marijuana to be included in as the definition of medical use. That was required a 3/4 majority, and that's exactly what happened. But we're talking about regulation. So the legislature sets forth the framework, but the regulations are set forth and authorized by the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs. They are the ones that are responsible for the regulations, and they're doing so right now, and they can change them if they like. They have the ability to do that. There's rulemaking process, and those regulations are set by that department.
So Jim is correct, and my colleague's correct. Yeah, if you want to do changes, if the legislature passes it, and again, we have a former legislator in the room, so keep me honest here. If the legislature passes it, they can undo it with 50% plus one vote in the House and in the Senate. Whereas if it's voted through by the people, that would take a supermajority, 75% plus one. So it would be easier to change if it was passed by the legislature. However, our committee's position is still that the legislature should not do this, the people should not vote it, and it shouldn't be on the ballot to begin with.
Well, it should be on the ballot. I mean, the voters got enough signatures to get it on the ballot. So, I mean, you can't say it shouldn't be on the ballot. It is on the ballot. You're just saying it shouldn't be voted for.
No, I'm saying it shouldn't be on the ballot by the rule of law.
Well, the Board of Canvassers today put it on the ballot. So, like, they're the ones that make that decision. So that's not even up for debate. They decided that it's going to be on the ballot. That is not it. That's not something that we can debate about.
If I can, the Board of Canvassers, of course, that's not their decision. The only thing that they had to do today to put it on the ballot was to certify the signatures. There could then be subsequent other things to keep it off the ballot, including court action, which a lot of the media asked me about today, and we haven't taken a position on that. We haven't asked for a TRO or anything along those lines. But our position is it conflicts with federal law, and the Board of Canvassers, of course, that's not their area. They just have to say, were you guys able to buy enough signatures to get this on the ballot? And their answer was yes. Now, along those lines, if I went out and I passed enough petitions around that we could drive 100 miles an hour in the state of Michigan, I suppose that could get on the ballot, you know, and frankly, that's one that would help me. No, I'm kidding. I don't drive that fast. That'd be crazy. So yeah, anything can technically get on the ballot, whether it is in conflict with other laws apparently or not.
Okay, one more question over here.
Mr. Morris, first of all, thank you for coming being a human pinata. But my question for you is strictly this, is how are you going to handle the economic destruction that this brings, i.e. where Colorado has seen a reduction in their microbreweries, because microbreweries help to employ a lot of steel factory workers to make the vats, the electricians and pipe fitters, they have to put those vats in, and most of those vats are found in restaurants, to where it employs restaurant employees, you know, Gordon Foods. They have found it has severely destroyed the microbrewery system in Colorado itself.
Well, first of all, let me comment on the fact that there is an evolution in our economic society. Like that is a fact. Our society has to go through evolution. Sometimes some industries don't do as well while others prosper. Right? That perhaps may be an example of that. But I think what's more important is understanding that recreational marijuana is going to significantly increase and favor our economy. The number of jobs that this is going to create is staggering. There's going to be thousands and thousands of jobs, which is going to significantly contribute to our economic well-being in the state of Michigan. In addition to the fact that the state is going to realize hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax revenue. In 2017, the state of Colorado earned $247,000 in tax revenue. The state of Colorado has about half the population that we do here in Michigan. And so we are estimating at this point over $200,000 in revenue for its first year. I think that is a very conservative estimate. I believe that in very short time, the state of Michigan will benefit from this act and to the tune of $500 million a year. Sorry.
All right. No, you're good, man. I didn't want you to feel more like a pinata than you already do. So, boy, we're now into the business stuff, and I wish I had a lot longer to talk because I have a gazillion points about this. If all these great jobs are coming, why did the Michigan Chamber of Commerce, even before it made the ballot, come out and say this is a horrible idea for business? Why did the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce recently follow suit? Why have so many other small chambers of commerce followed suit? And oh, by the way, there's a couple other big ones that are going to be making their point heard very, very soon. Tax dollars. Oh, this is going to be great. Our roads are going to be fixed, right? Everything's going to be hunky-dory when we have all this new money. Well, a couple of you guys in this room are my age. I'm 50, and most of you guys are younger, and gals are younger, but a couple of you guys are my age. How many of you remember in this great state when we didn't have the lottery? I do. You guys remember not having the lottery? Couldn't go buy those tickets? Well, they told us, hey, once you get the lottery, your schools are never going to need money again. We're going to have the biggest, best, newest, most technologically advanced schools ever with the lottery. And how's that going? I mean, I take a look at public school budgets. It ain't going very well. So I kind of look at this as a fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you type of thing. By the way, these numbers, projections, and they don't include unintended cost, which I briefly touched on earlier, but we're only 5 years in. We don't know where this is actually going to balance out. This is before I even get to the fact that companies can still do drug testing. Companies can still say we're not going to hire people that are on the influence of marijuana. Oh, by the way, it can stay in your system 7, 14, 21, 28 days, as we know, as we talked about. That's science. And what about the jobs in this great state that have to do with transportation? What about the medical professionals? What about, you know, your heavy machinery operators? Folks, we are a state with 5% unemployment or less right now. This is going to be tough. And this is before I even get into absenteeism rates.
Time.
So I know I've probably
Very good.
overdone my time.
Linda, you had a question?
I just want to expand a little bit on the taxation question. I would like to know if there's been discussion around taxes. How much are they going to tax it? Where are the taxes? Are they going to go in the general fund? Are they going to be designated for a specific fund like the lottery was supposed to be? But we've all found out that obviously the schools got less money from the general fund because they got money from the lottery. So I'd like to know if there has been discussion on the tax issue.
Yes. In its first full year, recreational marijuana is projected to earn a total revenue of $1.5 billion. And that's just in the first year, which will generate a significant amount of revenue. And there's a 10% excise tax. And that 10% excise tax in our initiative language goes to 3 specific sources. First, a third of it will go to, or 35% will go to schools. And whatever amount that may be, it's an amount that they don't have now. Whatever amount that is directed towards those schools, regardless of whatever money was supposed to go through the lottery system, I can't tell you about that. What I can tell you is that their money that our schools, that our children don't have, they're going to get. That's number one. Another 35% is going to come from, is going to go to our roads. That is something that has been polled, has been demonstrated, that is a significant need in our state. Our roads will get additional money. It may not be enough to cure our problems. You know, we're Michigan and we're gonna have bad roads, right? But we certainly could use, and we will definitely, they will definitely take the money that is generated from it. And then the third source of that tax revenue will go to the municipalities who authorize the recreational facilities within their communities. They will also enjoy 30% of divided 15% amongst the municipality and the other 15% to the county in which that they're located. They will also enjoy a portion of that tax revenue. And that is revenue that is going to be welcomed. There's nobody that's going to say, no, we don't need, the schools are not going to say we don't need a portion of that revenue, of that minimum $250 million. They're going to get that money. It's going to go to them. It's in our language.
So again, we're at projections, and we can't say minimum because we don't know. It hasn't happened yet. And I find it interesting that they didn't choose to earmark anything for the medical field and substance abuse and rehab and stuff like that. Hopefully, if this god-awful thing passes, the local communities will do that, because he's correct. The local communities will have some direction with regard to the local money and how that's spent. But again, there's going to be unintended long-term consequences that we're not going to see for a while. We all know that, with all due respect to any legislators in the room, most legislators find ways to spend everything that they get, and there are no silver bullets. You know, this isn't going to fix our roads. This isn't going to fix our schools, and this is going to cause a lot of increased cost in law enforcement, abuse, health, long-term health concerns, et cetera. So if it was a magic silver bullet, I think everybody would have fired it and it'd be a great deal. But unfortunately, there are no magic silver bullets. And I just keep remembering those lottery commercials when I was a kid and how we were never going to need money for schools again. I don't want to be sold the same bill of goods twice in my life.
Very good. Gubernatorial candidate Evan Space has a question.
Yes, this is for both you guys. I have a question about in the criminal act of having marijuana. Will the reduction, or would there be even expungement of records for anybody that has had past penalties?
Thank you for that question. That is something that I am significantly interested in. The question again is whether our initiative provides for the expungement or the removal of convictions for marijuana-related offenses, and the answer, unfortunately, is no. The reason for that is that in writing this initiative, we found that that may have been too objectionable by some. I don't quite understand it. It's something that I significantly care about. I feel it is a travesty of justice that it's potentially possible for those that have been convicted of these offenses have them still on their record and have felonies that keep them from getting jobs and having these types of things that could hurt them. We don't have that in our initiative, but there is a social movement that will change that. The state of California is erasing thousands and thousands of criminal convictions. Washington is doing that. Massachusetts is doing that. Vermont is doing that. And Michigan, I feel, is very strongly about this, is that it is going to be up to our legislators to do something about it. It's restorative justice. Senator Cory Booker has introduced legislation about this. This is something that our federal government is looking at as well. So this is a movement, social justice movement, restorative justice movement that has to take place. When this initiative is successful, we then have to remove these criminal convictions from people's records because simply leaving them on there is just unfair.
So 2 points on this. One, I don't think that expungement should necessarily happen. I think that if you knowingly broke the law, and at the time you broke the law it was a law, then you made a bad choice. So I don't understand how that waving a magic wand as of, let's just hypothetically say all the ducks in a row, January 1, 2020, if this passes, would mean that anybody who had violations previously, they'd go away. For example, I think when the Michigan speed limits changed, I didn't see a big line at the Secretary of State's of people who had been convicted of speeding in the past saying, hey, wait a minute, it's a higher limit now. Isn't it okay now? Come on, guys. So, you know, and those affect auto insurance rates, and if you get a whole lot of tickets, they can affect employment and a lot of the same concerns that this gentleman has. So, but the second thing on social justice, and I thought about this when you referred to that earlier, do you know, and again, we all have our stats, but one of the stats that really concerns me and really bothers me is the fact that in the Denver metropolitan area, in the suburbs, the arrests went down when this happened, okay? So guys that look like me, kids that look like me, young adults who look like me, we're having less arrests. In the inner cities of Denver, they've gone up after legalization. And we've got that from a number of sources. So actually, from a social justice standpoint, I'm concerned about what this will do to the minority communities in our great state.
David Harrell, you have a question?
Yeah, so I think that the marijuana lobby is like the best propagandists out there, because you said earlier that there's been absolutely 0 people that have ever died from marijuana. And, you know, if you looked at cigarette smoking, for instance, you can smoke cigarette after cigarette, it's not going to kill you. What kills you is the cancer that you get. Marijuana smoking is about 30 times more carcinogenic than a cigarette. How can you say 0? I mean, I know that there's a lobby out there that spreads this around a lot in order to keep that narrative going. But, you know, people smoke marijuana and drive and get in accidents. People smoke marijuana and go up on a ladder and fall off. But it's never attributed to marijuana. Whereas, you know, smoking, drinking, those are all ancillary ways that you die, but they attribute it to those things. So I think that's a false narrative.
I appreciate your comment, but I disagree. I compared it to 88,000 deaths that are attributable to alcohol, right? And when I'm saying alcohol, alcohol is a toxic. It's a toxin. It's a poison, meaning that like people can, if you drink too much alcohol, you will die, like guaranteed. If you smoke too much marijuana or eat too much marijuana or ingest too much marijuana, you cannot die. That there is no overdose of marijuana, and that's what I'm referring to. Yes, there could be ancillary deaths, just like with any drug, with anything. If I drink too much water and I can no longer see properly, or if I take my eyes off the wheel, I could hit a tree. But when I talk about 0 deaths, I'm talking about the fact that you cannot die from the overuse of marijuana. And I also have to point out that marijuana is not only smoked, right? That's how everybody perceives it. But more and more and more and more each year, people are choosing to utilize marijuana in different forms, in an edible form, or in a beverage form, or in tinctures. There are even suppositories. There are increasingly numerous ways that marijuana can be ingested in the body. Smoking is just one of them. And when those do smoke, they smoke at significantly less rates than cigarettes. It's very unlikely that there's going to be somebody smoking a pack of marijuana joints, whereas most people that smoke cigarettes, they smoke a pack a day. And that is precisely what leads to the number 2 cause of death in this country, which is lung disease and cancer, behind heart disease.
He's absolutely right about the different ways people are taking marijuana. A lot of gummy products, a lot of candy products out there. There's no question about it. People are really eating those up, so to speak, in states that have legalized it, and particularly in Colorado. But I want to jump to the booze analogy, because there's been a lot of that, 88,000 deaths here, and it's more harmful for you or it's not, depending on which medical professional you listen to. Just because something is not quite as bad as something else doesn't mean that it's okay and we should embrace it. I mean, guys, first-degree murders are a really bad thing. It doesn't mean we should all engage in second or third-degree murder, So yeah, booze is bad. And like booze can do things to your body. Booze can cause you to overdose on it, and you can die right there the same night. That doesn't mean that anything that falls short of that bar is absolutely perfectly acceptable in any kind of society. So those type of arguments I just find not making a lot of sense. The other thing that I would comment about the whole topic, if you will, is I really don't understand in general the attitude that because you're not smoking it, it won't do any type of long-term harm. Certainly eating it, certainly ingesting it will change your body. It makes your mind feel a little different at the time you do it, from what I've been told. Otherwise, people wouldn't do it, and that will eventually have a long-term effect. Sure, you can get in a car accident by texting, get in a car accident by drinking a bottle of water, but the chances of you damaging yourself when your mind are off is a much larger chance.
This gentleman over here has been very patient, sir.
I'd like a little head count here. I'm just curious to know how many here are. I think this is a good idea to have marijuana on a recreational basis. I'm just curious.
This is where you guys raise your hand.
Well, so much for my straw poll afterwards. So that's right. We can jump the gun a little bit here. We had another question over here. Where are we? Yes, this gentleman over here has been patient as well. Thank you, sir.
I'm just curious, Scott. You talk about, marijuana's, all these bad facts about marijuana. If you had a choice, would you rather put somebody on the road that smoked a joint, or would you rather put somebody on the road that just drank a pint of whiskey? Who would you rather see on the road?
In that case,
I'm trying to make a point here.
Sure.
You're making it sound like
it's a great point.
that the medical marijuana is so bad for everybody, and any drug also, as well as controlled substances like prescribed. And it says right on it, do not drive, do not operate machinery, but they do anyways.
Yeah, great
So
question.
I'm not trying to say either one is right.
Right.
But I'm asking you a question. What would you rather have?
So first of all, you said medical, not recreational, and again, we have no position on medical marijuana, and that has nothing to do with the ballot question this year. Anybody taking medical can take it just like they normally can in Michigan. I would say neither, and I know that you want to pin me down and make me say a pint of whiskey, and frankly, if you get into pint versus extremely small amount, or if you get into extremely large amount of marijuana and one sip of whiskey, and I had a gun to my head, I would obviously pick the one that was less. But I don't want either one of those people. And to kind of carry it further, I mean, I don't want anybody smoking marijuana on the road. I don't want anybody doing a pint of whiskey on the road. I don't want anybody on cocaine on the road. I don't want any people on heroin on the road. I don't want any people on scotch on the road. I mean, I think it's all bad, and it's all bad at varying levels depending on how much of it you have.
Well, for me, I would much rather have somebody smoke a joint than drive under the influence of alcohol for a lot of different reasons. First of all, I agree. I think he's got a good answer. I don't want anybody driving under the influence of anything, right?
Amen.
I am not trying to act as though that should be the case. But let me explain something. And this is science, and I am a scientist.
We have a rocket scientist in the room.
The acute effects of marijuana after ingestion through oral inhalation lasts for at a peak at about after 20 minutes. Okay, after 20 minutes, it is at a peak in our blood system to the degree to which that it's going to have a significant psychomotor effect, and then after that, it's not gone, but it's significantly decreased. Alcohol, on the other hand, will steadily increase. And where individuals will drink and continue to drink more, and then they don't realize that how much they've drank, and then they've gotten to the point where that absorption of alcohol is significantly more than they had even realized, and then there's this elimination of alcohol that is almost is equal as far as it coming from out of our bodies. Therefore, people drinking alcohol have much longer periods of time that they are dangerous on the roads than people using marijuana. That is a proven fact. Nobody can even argue that. And so somebody smoking a joint, they could be, depending upon, and this is very different between every individual, but they could be fine in 20 minutes and be able to drive, regardless of what their THC content is in their blood. But you cannot say the same thing about alcohol. Alcohol is very predictable, and that is why we have a 0.08 standard in this state. 0.08 grams per 210 liters of breath, meaning if you exceed that, you're operating under the influence. You can't say that about marijuana. The reason is because everybody's different, and everybody reacts differently. And chronic users are different than naive users, and people that have higher fat content are different than others that have lower fat content. Everybody's different.
So on that, real quick as a follow-up, the same is true for alcohol. And again, I don't endorse either, and I hate the alcohol to weed comparison in general. They're both bad. We shouldn't do either one of them. But if we all go in the other room and we have a beer, at my weight, I might come out to a 0.02 or
Your weight has nothing to do with
0.03
it.
on my first actual take, whereas somebody who is much smaller and thinner or someone who's much larger, size actually does matter in that situation. So I've certainly seen people have a beer and then continue on with their life and they're fine. I've also seen people have a beer and they're falling over and they can't put sentences together. Likewise with marijuana, I think that, he mentioned if you just have a joint, it'll wear off in 20 minutes, whereas if you have a beer and then you have another beer and you have another beer. So what if you have a joint and another joint and another joint? So I want to try and keep to apples and apples on this thing. And I think we concur that nobody, I'm not even going to have another Diet Pepsi before I hit the road tonight because, the caffeine may get me. I'll drink a water next.
Very good. Question in the back of the room?
This question is for Mr. Morris. My support for marijuana legalization is based mainly on a libertarian philosophy. And when I argue or debate the question with any conservative friends, I like to be able to cite the names of staunch conservatives who have come out in favor of marijuana legalization, and I believe my list includes the late William F. Buckley Jr. and the economist Milton Friedman. Do you know any other names that could be added to that list?
Right, so
staunch conservative.
we have a good number of conservative Republicans that have come out recently, especially after Jeff Sessions rescinded the Cole Memorandum for marijuana. Of course, Rand Paul did so. Cory Gardner from Colorado did so. President Donald Trump did so. Mitch McConnell, what's that? Right.
He said conservatives. Sorry, I had to.
I don't know about that. Mitch McConnell and these individuals are very much in support of hemp, which is another thing that our initiative will do. It will legalize the production, sale, and commercialization of industrialized hemp when there's actually no or very, very, very little THC, under 0.3%. But this is a very, very significant industry that is going to be created for Michigan, is the hemp industry. One of our oldest plants in this country. And so there's a significant, overwhelming amount of bipartisan support. And the federal policy in this country is going to be changed. It is in the process of being changed right now. And what's ironic is that it has been inspired by what Sessions has done. He has come out and said, without seeking anybody's approval or talking to anybody in Congress about it, he came out and said, we're going to rescind the Cole Memorandum. And then hundreds of people said, no, we're not going to do that. And now you see what's going to happen. Cory Gardner is introducing legislation next week that is going to preserve a state's right to enact these laws. And it is necessary for that to happen, because there's people that question it. There's people that say that the states don't have the right to do that. And then there's those that do. Well, guess what? 30 states thus far have done it, right? And there's a bunch more that are thinking about it, at least with regard to medical or recreational or both. And so there is going to be some clarification on this issue, and that's going to come with bipartisan support.
It's interesting. It's a bipartisan. Just one quick point, since I hadn't addressed that one. It's interesting. Yeah, it is a very bipartisan issue. Again, he concurred that federal law is not changed, and they're working on changing it. So I stick to that talking point. But Boehner, he'll go anywhere a check is. He's a big tobacco guy for a lot of years. And certainly there are a lot of Democrats on the other side, most notably nationally, led by former Congressman Patrick Kennedy, he of the Kennedy family. So this is one of the most bipartisan things I've ever worked on.
Scott, can you tell me the difference, clarify, what's the difference between Camel Joe, Marlboro Man, then you got brownies, gummy bears, then you got the Corona lady, nice butt, always going in the sunset, drinking beer. What's the difference between these?
Sure. So Camel Joe and the Marlboro Man, and a lot of the, not the Marlboro Man as much, but a lot of these younger attracting things like the Camel back in the day, were designed to get children interested. It's not something that the average adult's going to go, oh, wow, look at that cartoon guy, he's kind of fun. When we get into the lady with the attractive posterior, as you said, yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think when I was a kid, frankly, unless a girl could throw a baseball really well, I wasn't that interested until I was older and developed some other things. So they weren't really reaching out to me in that way. I didn't find, I was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I thought the Camel guy looked pretty cool. I thought brownies were tasty, but I wasn't worried about who was wearing what swimsuit on TV. So I think there's a bit of a difference there when we look at who's trying to appeal to what different age group.
The regulations as it relates to marijuana and the products that are created from marijuana specifically prohibit any type of marketing to children. Like, there are rules that are forbid it, and those rules will be enforced. We do not suggest or we do not condone any type of marketing to children. In fact, children should not be utilizing cannabis unless it's for a medical purpose, supervised by a physician with the consent of the parents. So what the question being, look at these other markets, look at alcohol, look at tobacco. yeah, they're using creative marketing, and these are big companies that are doing it. They're using creative marketing tactics, but hopefully they're not marketing to children either. They shouldn't be. But marijuana will be marketed to adults as it should be. It is for adults, and recreational marijuana in this ballot initiative are for those that are 21 and older.
Okay, we got one more question, then another one, and that's about what we have time for.
Thank you. Mr. Greenlee, you said that it's criminals that are involved in the marijuana trade.
I did not.
Okay, well, I assume that you believe that according to the rule of law, it would be criminals involved in the marijuana trade.
Yes, anybody who is involved in selling it currently is breaking a federal law.
And if the Muskegon police force isn't really taking such criminal activity that seriously, we can assume that the money generated from this trade is therefore staying in the hands of criminals. And so my question is, why wouldn't you want to help us law-abiding, tax-paying citizens be a part of that economy instead of, since you already know the Muskegon police and others aren't doing anything about the criminal activity, why would you leave all that money in the hands of criminals instead of, since you already know that no one's prosecuting them, let that money flow into the pockets of, tax-paying, hardworking Americans?
Sure, what a great question. So absolutely not are the Muskegon law enforcement community or other law enforcement communities ignoring this. I think that there is a false narrative out there. I think there's a false, yes, jail for just marijuana, okay?
Prison.
Or prison, sorry, for just marijuana, and there is a difference between the two. So my point is, I think there's a false narrative out there that folks attempt to put there, that it either has to be completely legal and no issues, or people are going to go to jail. And what I'm, okay, let me, I'm certainly trying, but I keep getting cut off. So there are a lot of different things in between there. There are tickets, there are fines, there are completely appropriate type of penalties for the person who uses it once and doesn't have any other issues, or uses it twice and doesn't have any other issues. And in fact, those types of fines are being handed out, and that type of money is getting into the budgets and does go to the tax-obeying citizens and the law-abiding citizens by providing essential services. So I'm not saying that it's okay behavior, because it's not, but I'm also not saying, and have never said, that any individual who does just one joint or one gummy bear or one piece of candy or one piece of brownie or whatever it is should wind up in prison. That's not our stance at all, and that's not what happens. It is enforced when the police have an opportunity to enforce it. Sometimes you get a warning, just like when you're driving a little too fast, sometimes you get a warning. But in general, people, and very specifically, people are not on a first offense dragged off to jail and what have you. There's been other issues.
That's not true. People are dragged off to jail, like repeatedly, every single day. Marijuana, if you don't have a card and you haven't found a possession of marijuana, nobody's getting off on it. I've been doing this for a long time. It doesn't happen. When this initiative passes, that is going to end. Being in possession of marijuana will be a right, just like being in possession of alcohol, as long as you follow the rules. And that is what it should be, because the absurdity here is that alcohol, as dangerous as it is commonplace in our society. Yet marijuana is not dangerous, not even close to as dangerous as alcohol is not. And that's what we're talking about here. We have to regulate it to ensure that there are those that are in the black market that are not supposed to be in the market for marijuana, that they're eliminated. That we have to ensure that people are not going to jail or being arrested or have criminal convictions on their record. And we have to ensure that those who wish to utilize on a recreational basis or a medical basis are doing so responsibly, sensibly, and pursuant to a law that allows for it and that can allow the industry to flourish and money to be poured into our economy and into our state coffers.
We got one more question, and you guys can you hang around a little bit afterwards if anybody has a question, and then we'll do closing statements. This lady who bought a front row ticket and hasn't got a chance to ask a question.
Paid double.
I read in the paper that 3 cities in Oakland County were designated as distribution centers, one of which is Hazel Park. how did Hazel Park get to be selected, and also what effect will it have on the community?
So, thank you for your question. What you're referring to is there are 3, I believe, cities in Oakland County that have authorized facilities, retail facilities, to sell medical marijuana, not recreational marijuana. And Hazel Park was, I think, the first. The other one being Orion Township, and then Walled Lake. I think are the 3. And none of them have opened any yet. But Hazel Park, they decided, and that's what the that's what the MMFLA that allows for medical marijuana facilities provides. That a city, a municipality, gets to choose if they want any, and if they do want some, how many. And that same thing goes for our recreational initiative. If a municipality decides that they don't want any facilities within their community, then they don't have to have them. Or on the other hand, if they decide that they want one, or if they want 10 or an unlimited amount, they can decide. That being said, our initiative does provide for a referendum. So our initiative does say that if the city's voters, if our residents, if they want it to be on the ballot and they want to vote for it, then I'll give them the right to do it. But it's a municipality who chooses. And then the second part of your question is how is that going to... How does that affect the community? Well, first of all, the community's patients will have a lot safer and closer access to their medicine, right? And I think that's one of the most important things, because every municipality has a number of patients that are medical marijuana patients that are seeking treatment. They deserve to have a facility that they can go to that can get safe medicine, just like at a Walgreens, for somebody else to get their medicine there. So that significantly helps the community. And it's going to help reduce the black market in that community, because when people have a choice, medical patients and recreational consumers, when they have a choice and they can go to a safe environment in which they can get safe, tested, pesticide-free medicine, or they can get it from the black market, majority of those people are going to go to that safe choice. And that... Oh, no. So the answer, that question was, will there be an increased amount of crime? In fact, the opposite is true. It has been proven that there's a decrease in the amount of violent crime because less people are drinking alcohol. That's one reason. When there's more people drinking alcohol, there's more individuals that are engaging in crime. There's less people, there's going to be less crime. No, there has been no studies that have demonstrated that there's any type of increase in violent crime or property crimes or theft crimes statistically significant as a result of the inclusion of retail facilities.
Again, I agree with his explanation on the fact that we're talking about medical here. We're not talking about recreational, and I'm trying to stay very laser focused.
We are talking about recreational, yes.
No, this is medical. This Hazel Park thing is medical.
That's just medical.
It's just medical, yeah. So I'm trying to stay laser focused on the issue at hand, because I know other people are going to try and muddy the two together and say, look, medical's great, we need to have more marijuana, et cetera, and it has no effect on medical. I'm going to say that 8,000 times a day between now and November if this thing goes on the ballot, because this will not have any effect, whether it passes or doesn't pass, on medical in the state of Michigan. Very important to clarify that, folks, because I have a feeling it's going to try and be gotten a little bit muddy. In terms of the numbers and violent crime and other crime, again, I'll tell you, you can find stats on about anything. So I'm not here to say that Hazel Park is going to have more crime because of this, and I'm certainly not here to say that they're going to have less crime. In terms of a black market going away, that just doesn't happen. Look at Colorado. Look at the tourists that they attract. You know, the lady on Christmas Eve who was driving back into Nebraska and got pulled over with the 60 pounds of weed and said, oh, it's Christmas gifts. You know, you guys, come on. I had to go and get Christmas gifts for up here in Colorado because I couldn't get it here. On Friday, I'm meeting with a state representative from Wisconsin, from the northern part of Wisconsin. He's told me all about the law enforcement fits they're having with people in Wisconsin sneaking over into Michigan, establishing resident, renting a house, getting a card, grabbing as much as they can, and driving it where? Back into Wisconsin. Our neighbors are not excited about this. And by the way, that's another reason the state chamber isn't excited about it. If you've got to go to if you're a Dallas company, you're going to expand into the Midwest. And you've got Ohio, where the good people voted it down. You've got Indiana, which doesn't have it. You've got Wisconsin, which doesn't have it. And you've got Michigan that has it. And you've got a transportation component to your business. What state are you going to cross off first as a responsible business owner?
Okay, thank you. I think what we'll do is give each of our debaters up to 3 minutes for closing statements. Barton, you want to start?
I want to start with addressing something that was mentioned earlier about opiate abuse and opiate mortality rates, and a very, very important issue that we're all dealing with is the crisis that is going on in this country. Cannabis access is associated with reduced rates of opiate use, abuse, opiate-related hospitalizations, opiate-related traffic fatalities, opiate-related drug treatment admissions, and opiate-related overdose deaths. That was a study that was done by the Association of Medical and Adult Use Marijuana Laws with Opiate Prescribing, that's the name of the study actually, Association of Medical and Adult Use Marijuana Laws with Opiate Prescribing for Medicaid Enrollees by JAMA International Medicine in 2018. Opiate crisis is killing our society, and there's killing individuals. People are using these products in order to treat their pain. They're getting addicted to them, and they're turning to even other opiates like heroin. The fact of the matter is that recreational marijuana legalization can eliminate that or can significantly reduce it. That is a fact. And that is something that we have to, it is a fact. That is something that we have to consider. But there's another fact, is that there is a black market to marijuana, and it's significant. And in that black market, these are criminals that are involved in it, and they're doing it not to treat patients and not to produce marijuana for our society and for the state, but they're for themselves. That black market has to be eliminated, or has to be significantly reduced. There's only one way to do that, is to legalize the recreational use of marijuana. There's only one way to eliminate the senseless number of convictions and arrests that did I mention 3.3% minorities are more 3%. I mean, they're more likely to be arrested. That is a travesty. That we have to eliminate that, and we can do that with the legalization of recreational marijuana. We can increase our tax revenue. We can decrease the black market. We can continue to treat medical illnesses. We can treat and deal with our opiate crisis. This is an opportunity that we have, and we have to take advantage of it. And we're going to be the 10th state that does it, the only Midwestern state that does it. And it is going to be the benefit to our state, and so I'm very grateful to be a part of it. I'm grateful that today is a historic day that it got on the ballot. And I'm very grateful for that, and I'm grateful to be here and talk to you about it. Thank you.
So first of all, thank you everybody for being here tonight, and your kindness and your questions, and thank you to our NORC chair for hosting this. I'm not sure what JAM Medical International is.
JAMA.
But it doesn't sound like Johns Hopkins to me. I think we can find statistics on this stuff that are all over the board and will tell you, again, numbers, you know, are depend on who you survey and what you look at. And I don't think there's a real conclusive thing out there, because a lot of it's in flux, and the opiate thing is new. And by the way, again, anybody who says that marijuana is not a gateway drug probably uses the wrong argument. They probably say, I know lots of people that use marijuana that don't do harder drugs. And my question's always, well, how many people do you think just woke up one morning and said, hey, let's try cocaine today? You know, what the heck? Sounds like a good idea. Haven't ever done any marijuana or anything lower, but let's go get hooked on something stronger. It's not how people start. People start at one level, they move to the next, they move to the next. I share his concerns about social justice, and I again direct you to Colorado and the fact that minority arrests have increased in the inner cities after marijuana became recreational legal. It is a major problem, and it's not going to go away magically because there's more marijuana around. Instead, if we're that only Midwest state, think about the great visitors that we're going to attract. Won't that be fun? You know, we'll have a whole new tourist market of people who want to come up here and buy as much of it as they can. And those are people who often will use it and potentially get in other challenges. The tax dollars, again, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you. As soon as I see the schools getting all that lottery money and not needing anything, I'll buy into that a little more. By the way, you guys should Google search Cherry Creek Public Schools. It's a little suburb of Denver. Their superintendent said in 2016 he still hadn't seen a dime of marijuana money. So it's not all peaches and cream out there. And at the end of the day, I believe it's against the law. And I certainly encourage all of you to vote no. I encourage, if your mind isn't made up, to continue to do research, look at statistics on both sides, and also employ common sense. If there's more of it around, do you think children will have a better opportunity to get it? And by the way, if it's so safe, if it's no big deal, if it's 20 minutes later, why is my colleague opposed to people under 21 using it if it's not a big deal? I think it's a big deal, folks, and I hope you'll join me in voting no. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Barton Morris and Scott Greenlee. Good job. And thank you all for asking good questions.